Now, folks, life's a funny highway, ain't it? You're cruising along, windows down, feeling the breeze of trust and loyalty. And then out of nowhere, bam, you hit a pothole called betrayal. Tonight, we're not talking politics or power plays. No, sir. We're talking about truth, temptation, and the high price of secrets in the spotlight. Let's buckle up, because this ride's about to get wild. You ever notice how some couples just look like they've got it all figured out? Picture perfect smiles, matching energy, the kind of chemistry that makes you believe in fairy tales again. That's what folks thought when they looked at J.D. Vance and his wife. The speeches, the campaigns, the hand-holding at rallies, it all painted a portrait of balance. He was the rising political star, and she, the quiet strength by his side. The crowd saw devotion, the cameras caught connection, and when the spotlight hit just right, it almost looked divine. But let me tell you something, perfection's a tricky thing. It's like smoke. It dances, it dazzles, it fills a room with wonder, but try to grab it, hold it, make it stay. It slips right through your fingers. Behind that perfect picture, behind the applause and the campaign slogans, there were cracks. Little ones at first, late night calls that didn't get answered, the small, tired smiles that replaced laughter. Two people living parallel lives, close enough to touch, but miles apart in their hearts. See the public eye. It's a cruel kind of mirror. It shows you what you want to see, not what's really there. Folks saw love and loyalty, but what they missed was the exhaustion, the quiet drifting that comes when ambition outpaces affection. J.D. was chasing power, chasing purpose, chasing legacy. And in that chase, he forgot that even a strong marriage can run out of gas if you don't pull over to refill it with something real. That's when temptation sneaks in, all dressed up like admiration. It doesn't come knocking like a villain. No, it slides in smooth, disguised as connection, as understanding. And suddenly, the man who once had it all finds himself drawn to something or someone that makes him feel seen again. It's human, sure, but it's also dangerous. Because when your whole world's built on the idea of being the perfect family, one wrong move sends the whole thing tumbling down. Now, J.D. and his wife, they played their roles well. They smiled when the cameras flashed. They nodded through interviews. They told the world they were stronger than ever. But behind the doors, in the quiet moments where truth doesn't need a microphone, she could feel it. That distance, that coldness, that silence between words that used to mean something. And that's the part people don't see when they idolize the image. The strain it takes to keep up the show. The loneliness that grows even in the company of someone you once swore to love forever. It's not about politics or status or faith. It's about the slow unraveling of something sacred when honesty gets traded for appearances. So yeah, to the world, they looked unbreakable. But sometimes the prettiest glass shatters first because it's the thinnest where the light shines brightest. Now let's talk about Erika Kirk. You know, every story's got that one character who walks into the room and changes the air without saying a word. She was that kind of presence. Confident, graceful, the sort of woman who didn't just enter a space. She claimed it quietly. No big gestures, no loud laughs, just a steady kind of charm that made people lean in when she spoke. She wasn't just beautiful. She was composed, deliberate, magnetic in a way that made everyone feel like they were part of her circle. Even if just for a moment, she'd built her own name, her own lane, in a world where most folks were still trying to figure out which road to take. She was smart, sharp with words, sharper with timing, and she knew how to make people feel heard. That's a rare gift, especially in Rue. Full of egos and ambition, and that's what made her stand out to someone like J.D. In the noise of politics, where everyone's talking and no one's really listening. Here comes a voice that felt genuine, a voice that didn't need to compete. Now, you mix admiration with vulnerability, and you've got a cocktail that can change everything. J.D. saw in her what he'd started to lose at home, attention, validation, that quiet admiration that says, I see you. Not the politician, not the public figure, but the man behind it all. That kind of recognition can be intoxicating. And Erika, well, she knew the rhythm of that dance. She wasn't chasing chaos. She was drawn to the fire. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was ego. Maybe it was the thrill of being seen by someone powerful. Whatever it was, it blurred the lines between professionalism and something far more dangerous. People like to think affairs are born in the dark, but they rarely start that way. They begin in the daylight. Small smiles, shared jokes, a lingering pause at the end of a conversation. It's innocent until it's not. And by the time you realize what's happening, it's already happened. For Erika, it wasn't about stealing a man. It was about feeling like she mattered in a world that often treats women like decoration. For JD, it was about escaping the weight of his own image, if only for a little while. There's no villain here, not really. Just two people caught in the gravity of their own choices. But that's the thing about gravity. It doesn't care about intentions. It just pulls and keeps pulling until something breaks. And when the truth finally surfaces, it's never the same as the fantasy that started it all, because sometimes the brightest star in the room ain't there to light your path. It's there to show you just how deep your shadows go. What's wild about human nature is how thin that line really is, the one between admiration and desire. It starts off clean, harmless even. You tell yourself it's just respect, just appreciation for someone's mind, their spirit, the way they carry themselves. But then comes that moment, small, almost invisible, where admiration takes a breath and turns into something heavier. That's the point where hearts start to whisper louder than reason. JD found himself in that space, that quiet space between shouldn't and just this once. It didn't happen in a headline moment, no scandalous scene, no thunderclap of guilt. It happened in conversations that went a little too long, smiles that lingered a second too late. Two people orbiting the same fire, convincing themselves they could play with the sparks and not get burned. And at first, it feels good. That attention, that rush, the rediscovery of something you thought you'd lost. Maybe it's youth, maybe it's passion, maybe it's just feeling alive again. But it's like dancing too close to the edge of a cliff. It's thrilling until you lose your footing. See, that's how these things grow. Not in the shadows, but in the half-light, where you can still pretend it's all innocent. The brain's full of justifications. It's nothing. We're just talking. No one's getting hurt. But deep down, you feel that pull. You start waiting for their messages, thinking about their laugh, replaying moments that shouldn't mean anything but somehow do. And that's when you know you're already in too deep. JD told himself it was harmless, that he could manage it. He's a man used to control over his image, his message, his destiny. But desire doesn't care much for control. It's not logical, it's not patient, and it sure as hell doesn't ask for permission. Erika, she wasn't scheming, but she wasn't blind either. She could feel the charge between them, that silent electricity that fills the air when two people start crossing lines they swore they wouldn't. There's a moment, always a moment, when you can still walk away. You can take a breath, step back, and save yourself from you fall. But when pride gets mixed with passion, people start believing they're exceptions to the rules. They forget that consequences don't take rain checks. And by the time you realize it's too late, the damage is already written in the looks, the whispers, the guilt you carry home at night. What began as admiration became attachment, then temptation, then something far harder to explain. It wasn't love, not really. It was need. Need for connection, need to feel seen, need to feel something real in a world built on performance. But the truth is, the moment you cross that line, you stop being who you thought you were. Because once admiration turns into desire, the story stops being about who you admire and starts being about what you're willing to lose. Every truth has its moment, that one heartbeat when silence just can't hold it anymore. For JD's wife, that moment came not with anger, but with clarity. She'd been feeling it long before the world had a clue. That quiet shift in his tone, the distance in his eyes, the way he'd drift through their home like a ghost wearing his own skin. You don't need proof when your soul already knows. Sometimes the body speaks before the mind's ready to listen. A tension, a heaviness, a sense that something sacred's been touched by another hand. She didn't go searching for it, didn't dig through messages or play detective. She didn't have to. The truth was already living in the spaces between them. The late night meetings that stretched too long, the excuses that didn't quite add up, the way his name started sounding strange when he said, "I love you." She'd loved that man enough to build a life around him, and that kind of love gives you a radar. You can feel when something's off, like a frequency that's just a little out of tune. When the truth finally surfaced, it wasn't dramatic. There was no shouting, no shattered glass, no grand betrayal scene straight out of a movie, just two people standing in the wreckage of what they'd built, knowing it could never look the same again. She asked him questions, calm ones. Questions that didn't need words so much as honesty. And for the first time in a long time, JD couldn't hide behind speeches or charm. He had to face her, not as a husband or a senator or a public figure, but as a man who'd lost his way. That's the thing about truth. It's brutal, but it's pure. It strips away the illusions, the carefully painted masks, and leaves only what's real. She didn't expose him to the world out of spite. She did it because living in a lie was worse than living in the storm that followed. People say strength is staying quiet, keeping the peace, but sometimes strength is standing up and saying, no more pretending. Her revelation wasn't a performance, it was liberation. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about reclaiming her voice. Because in a world where women are often told to smile through betrayal, she chose to speak. And when she did, the silence shattered. The truth spread like wildfire, through headlines, through whispers, through the hearts of those who'd once called them untouchable. It hurt him, sure. It hurt her more. But there's a strange kind of peace that comes when you finally stop carrying someone else's secret. She didn't just expose an affair, she exposed the cost of living a double life. Because sometimes telling the truth isn't about breaking someone else. It's about saving yourself. Once the truth was out, it didn't crawl, it ran fast, faster than either of them could have imagined. That's the thing about secrets in the modern world. The moment they taste daylight, they spread like wildfire through dry grass. Social media lit up like a storm, headlines screaming, timelines spinning, folks taking sides before the dust had even settled. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, the fall of a golden couple, the scandal that cracked the image of perfection. It wasn't just gossip, it was spectacle. And once the crowd gets TS show, there's no calling it back. JD tried to play it cool at first, like the whole thing was just a misunderstanding. He'd seen politicians survive worse. Deny, redirect, distract. That's the playbook. But this wasn't politics anymore. This was personal. You can't spin your way out of a broken home. The look in his wife's eyes during those first interviews told the world everything they needed to know. No press release could rewrite that truth. And Erika, she went quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that only comes when someone realizes the story is no longer theirs to control. Her name, her face, her reputation, all of it turned into fuel for other people's narratives. Overnight, she wasn't a woman with ambition, she was a symbol. A cautionary tale. Folks who'd once smiled at her now looked at her like she was poison. That's the price of exposure. Doesn't matter if you meant to or not. Once your name's out there, the world decides what it means. The allies scattered. People JD had called friends suddenly got real busy. The invitations stopped. The applause faded. That's the irony of power. Everyone wants to stand next to you when you're rising, but when the fall starts, you fall alone. The same hands that once lifted him up were now pointing fingers. And the higher the pedestal, the harder the landing. The media milked it, of course. Every frame, every quote, every tear became content. It wasn't just a scandal, it was entertainment. And in this world, outrage sells better than truth. People love to watch a downfall. Reminds them that the folks they put on pedestals are just as flawed, just as human as they are, maybe even more so. But underneath all the noise, the real pain wasn't public, it was private. The late night reflections, the empty house, the realization that everything he'd built, career, credibility, family, was now hanging by a thread. You can rebuild a reputation, sure. You can repair an image. But trust, once that's gone, it's like glass. You can glue it back together, but the cracks never disappear. Because once the world starts watching you fall, the only way to stand again is to stop performing and start telling the truth. When the dust finally settled and the noise started to fade, what was left wasn't the headlines or the gossip or the noise of 1,000 opinions. It was silence. The kind of silence that follows truth when it's done its work. You can lose a lot in a storm like that. Your name, your pride, your place in the world. But what it leaves behind, if you're lucky, is clarity. Clarity about what really matters and what was just decoration. See, power's a funny thing. It makes people believe they're untouchable, like they can bend reality around their choices. But life's got a way of reminding you that character always comes due. Doesn't matter how high you climb, how many cameras love your face. If you forget who you are when the lights go out, everything else is just noise. JD learned that the hard way. You can be a man of status, a man of influence, but none of that means a thing if you stop being a man of integrity. And for his wife, the lesson came wrapped in pain, but delivered with purpose. She walked through fire and came out scorched, but standing. That's the thing about truth. It hurts, but it also purifies. It burns away what's false, what's fragile, and leaves you standing there, raw but real. She didn't need to rebuild the image they had. She needed to rebuild herself. And in that rebuilding, there's power. Erika, too, faced her reckoning. The attention that once felt like light turned blinding. But even in that exposure, there's a chance for redemption. Not in the court of public opinion, but in the quiet one inside your own heart.